let's move to our next topic, which is constructor chaining. What is constructor chaining? Let's suppose you are having multiple constructors within same class and you want to execute multiple constructors on one object creation only. So far we have seen that on every single object one constructor will execute, right? But this time requirement is different. I want to execute multiple constructors in a chain for one object creation only. Okay, and if the multiple constructors will execute in chain, that is known as constructor chaining for one object creation only. Okay, constructor chaining can be done within same class, or it could be also defined by parent class and child class both. Okay, so it could be within class or outside the class as well. Now, what are the scenarios where we need to execute multiple constructors for the same object creation? That is the question that we will try to address by the implementation. I'm taking very easy example of first type of constructor chaining, that is constructor chaining within same class. So what I'm doing, I have employee class having name, salary, age, and having three constructors. First is taking name, salary, age, and second one is taking name and age, and third is only taking salary. Based on the requirement, I'll use one of the constructor, right? Now let's suppose I'm creating employee object with name and age, and then this constructor is going to execute. If I'm passing all three values, then that's fine. All three values will be initialized. But let's suppose if I am passing name and age only, and in that case also I want to initialize some salary value. A default salary value should be there. So my requirement is, in case when I'm having only name and age and this constructor is going to invoke, I also want to initialize some default salary value for this object. Okay. So salary initialization can be done by this constructor because this constructor is already defined just for initializing salary. So what I want now, I want to execute this constructor to initialize name and age, and this constructor to initialize default salary value. Means I want to execute both of these constructor on same object. So when you have that type of scenarios, you need to take the help of constructor chaining concept. Now the question is, if I want to execute this constructor, call this constructor from this two parameterized constructor, then how I can define the calling? Because if you guys remember in constructors concept, I explained you that constructors can never call explicitly. Means you cannot randomly call constructors anywhere, right? Every single time whenever you want to define the calling of constructors, there is always some certain guidelines provided by technology that you must have to follow while defining the calling of constructors. For example, while creating the object, we always follow this approach. While creating the object, we define the constructor calling. So the place is fixed. You cannot call that anywhere, right? Similarly, when you want to define this constructor, when you want to call this constructor, how you will define the calling, because you cannot manually call. So technology again provide you a guideline that you must have to follow if you want to implement constructor chaining. What is that guideline? Guideline says that if you want to call a constructor from another constructor, you need to use a keyword called this. This keyword is also used to define the call of constructor. Okay. Now, if you remember, this keyword is also used to access class level data members in case of data shadowing. Similarly, this is also used for define the calling of one constructor from another constructor in case of constructor chaining. Okay, but there is one rule associated with that calling, that is you must have to define this calling in the first statement of the constructor. Means you cannot put this anywhere in your code. Okay, you must have to define calling of one constructor into another constructor in first statement of a constructor. Okay, these two guidelines or rules while define the calling of constructor in constructor chaining. Rule number one is you must have to use this keyword to define the calling of constructor, and rule number two is this must be the first statement of the constructor. So whenever I'm going to run this code with name and age, my two parameterized constructor will invoke and it will initialize name and age, and before that it will also execute one parameterized constructor which will instantiate salary a default salary value there, which is 25,000. If you want to better understand the execution flow of this code, you can run this in debugging mode. What you need to simply do, you need to simply add this breakpoint. If you double click here, you can add a breakpoint anywhere in the code. Generally, we used to put it in first statement of main method, and then right click on the code and then say debug as Java application, and then proceed, switch. Now you can see this is the highlighted line, means right now the execution is on this line. You can now say step over F6, you can press to just to move to the next step, but I don't want to move to the next step. I want to get into this step, so that I'll move to this constructor calling. Okay, so what I can do is I can use step into, which is F5. I can directly press F5 and you can see the calling goes from here to here. If I mouse over on ename, I can get main, the value, the actual argument that has been passed to my ename, and age I'm getting here 25. Then from there again I want to do step into, so that the call goes to this constructor. Again I'm clicking on this and you can see the call goes here, and then this time you can see salary I'm getting 25,000 from here. Now I need to say F6 for step, next step. Okay, again I can press F6, then again F6, and when I'm saying F6 means this execution has been done, and it comes back here and initializing name this time. Okay, and then again F6, and then again F6, again F6, and it again come to the main method from where it started, and then it will say F6 again. If again you want to get into this step, you can again press F5 and then again F6 for next step. So it is printing name, it is printing salary, and it is printing age, and then it will again comes to the closing of main, and you can see it will terminate then. So you are getting min as name and 25,000 as salary and 25 as age. All three parameters get initialized, and both of these constructors execute one by one on this object, and that is nothing but constructor chaining. Guys, so far we are done with the constructor chaining within same class, and now we are moving to other concept, which is constructor chaining outside the class or constructor chaining in parent class. But before that we will discuss this, we first have to discuss one question, that is, can we inherit constructor? The answer is no, we can't inherit constructor. Now let's try to understand this question, why constructor not become the part of inheritance. To explain you this, I am taking one implementation. Okay, I have a base class having base constructor, and I have a child class which is having child constructor, and for a moment I am just assuming that, let's suppose there is no rule where constructor cannot inherit. I am assuming that constructor can be inherit, and let's suppose this constructor is inheriting to my child class and coming to my child class. Okay, in that case, when compiler will start compiling my child class, we'll see this constructor. Okay, now my compiler will not treat this as constructor, because as per the rule, constructor name must be same as its class name, and my child class name is child and this method name is base, and because the name is not same, compiler will not treat it as a constructor. That means compiler will start treating this as a normal method, and in that case compiler will expecting a return type before the method name, because a normal method must have some return type. And because this method is not having return type, because it was constructor in parent class and it was not having return type there, and now it become the part of child, let's suppose, and in that case, because it is not having return type, compiler will start throwing error. Okay, so guys, that's the first reason why constructor not become the part of inheritance, because if constructor will inherit to child class, it will be start treating as a normal method by compiler, and compiler will start expecting a return type before the constructor name, and because return type is missing, compiler will start throwing error, and that's the reason they do not allow you to inherit constructor to child class. That's the second reason why they do not allow you to inherit constructor in child class. So we are good with these two reasons. Now we are moving to our second way of implementing constructor chaining outside the class. In this implementation, I have a company class which is holding company name and initializing this company name by using company class constructor. Similarly, I have employee class which is child of company class holding ename, salary and age and initializing by its three parameterized constructor. And I'm also initializing it by using two parameterized constructor. This use case I already have explained you in my previous implementation, okay, where I was calling one constructor from another constructor. Okay, now the requirement is slightly different. What I want to do, I'm not only want to initialize ename, salary and age, which is the member of employee class, I also want to initialize cname, company name coming from the company class to my employee class. Now this company name can be initialized dynamically by its constructor. Okay, and constructor cannot become the part of child class, as we already have seen constructor do not take participation in inheritance. Okay, so how I can initialize this company name while creating the object of employee class? At the time of employee class object creation, I not only want to initialize ename, salary and age, but I also want to initialize cname, which is coming from parent class and now become the part of employee class. Okay. So for that reason, I want to execute this constructor while executing my child class constructor at same time. Means I want to make a call from child class constructor to parent class constructor, and for that reason I need to implement this constructor chaining concept outside the class. Okay, so let's extend my previous implementation itself, where I was just passing name and age, and in that case I was initializing salary with some default salary value which was 25,000. Now all three parameters or attributes get initialized: name, age and salary, but one attribute is still remaining there, which is cname, which is coming from company class, and for that reason I want to call parent class constructor. How I can define the calling of parent class constructor? For that reason I need to use super keyword to define the calling of parent class constructor, like this. And for super, if I want to pass some value for the company name, let's say I want to pass company name as HCL, like this. Okay, now what is going to be happen when I'll run this? Call goes to this constructor. Here ename and age will receive min and 2. From here a default salary initialization will be done by this constructor, means call comes here, and from there, because you are defining the parent class constructor call using super keyword, this HCL will be passed to this constructor, and from there it will assign to cname. Where is the cname now? Cname is available in the child class. So cname will also get initialized with HCL. Salary will also initialize. Ename and age is already initialized. So while creating the employee class object, all four data members will get initialized. And if I'll print the data, I'll get all four data populated here. Let me run this. And you can see I'm getting every single data here. For better clarity, you can run this code in debugging mode. I am using breakpoint again here on employee class constructor, and let me run this in debugging mode. Okay, call comes here, and from there again I'll say step into, which is F5. It goes from here to here. Ename is coming min and age is coming something. Then from here the call goes to this constructor. You can see now salary is coming a default salary value, and from here my call is going to the parent class constructor. Let's see. You can see it is coming here. Company name is coming here. This will initialize. Then these values will initialize. All values will get initialized, and then data will be print one by one. When you are making call of parent class constructor using super keyword, this calling must be the first statement of constructor. And if you guys remember, the rule was same for same class constructor calling as well. When you are making the call of same class constructor using this keyword, this must be the first statement of your constructor. So both of these callings must be the first statement of your constructor. But what about if in case you want to define both of the calling? For example, if I want to define this and super both from same constructor only, then what will happen? This is not allowed, because if you'll try to do this, either this becomes second statement or super becomes second statement, and Both cannot be second statement. Both must be the first statement of a constructor. So you cannot define the calling of same class constructor and the calling of parent class constructor from the same constructor. You must have to make sure that super you will make in the end. For example, my call comes to this, and from here I am calling the parallel class same class constructors, and then I am making call to the parent class constructor. So in the end, I am defining the call of parent class constructor. This is how you can manage this. But always remember, you cannot make these two statement in the same constructor, because then one of them will not be allow and you will get an error. Okay, that's one thing you must have to know. The second thing which everyone should know is, sometimes you will see that when we are creating some constructor, and if I am defining something like this is nothing but we are making the call to the parent class constructor, and I am making the calling of parent class default constructor here. Okay, and as you know that every class have a common parent, which is object class. Object class is a parent of all classes in Java. So when you are defining the calling something like that, that means you are making the call to the object class default constructor. Okay. So if you are making this call, that's fine. If you will not make this call, that also fine, because ultimately without calling the object class default constructor also, that will be fine. It is not making any impact on my code. So it is not mandatory to define this calling, and if you will have this calling, then also that not make any impact on my code. So you can have it, or without having it also your code will be absolutely fine. So don't worry about it. Alright guys, this much information is good enough for constructor chaining. So we are pretty much done with all these concepts: constructor chaining within same class, constructor chaining in parent class, and I also explained you why constructor do not become the part of inheritance in Java.